Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to day 4 of our Future of Work Virtual Summit series. Today, we're going to talk more about the contact center. This is where customer interactions really happen and take place. We're going to cover 3 main topics today. The first is around the changing nature of the contact center itself. Next, we're going to go into understanding the future of customer expectations and what they expect when they call in and have an interaction with us. And we're going to finish off the day talking about building a contact center designed all around remote agent work and the benefits that can come from that. So we have a lot to get through today and a lot to cover. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to our Future of Work Virtual Summit series. Now we're going to get a little bit deeper into the conversation around the contact center. With that, I'm happy to introduce Zachary Taylor, who is the Senior Director of Cisco's Contact Center Business Unit. He's going to talk to us about the changing nature of the contact center itself and to understand how to better deliver outstanding customer experiences every time. So with that, Zach, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks again, Scott. Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Taylor, Director of Strategic Communications for Cisco's Contact Center Business Unit, and I'd love to share some information today about some current context and some long-term strategy for our contact center business. As I begin sharing here, I just wanted to let you know that there's a word that everybody's using to describe the scenario we're in these days, and it's essentially unprecedented. And as I begin my other material discussion here, I'd like to give you some background associated with what we're doing as a business, not only to help in the short term, but also in the long term for our customers and our prospects. Now, the first thing I'd like to share with you is that our typical talk is around delivering magical experiences, but as you see, I've changed the word here to timely. Very timely that the contact center is a critical element of the response to the current pandemic. And I'll explain why in a few minutes, but let's do this. Let's provide some context. And one of the things I'd like to share with you is a statement I've been saying for years, and that is the contact center, or the call center actually, is neither. So what do I mean by that? I mean that it is no longer centralized and it's no longer just about calls. In fact, this has been going on a long time in our industry. Multimodal, omni-channel contacts is really what contact centers are all about these days, but also the distributed nature of contact centers. This is not new. This has been around for years, but the work at home element has been accelerated in the last few months, and we'll talk about that. So if we take a look aggregately at what's going on, there tends to be a disconnect between business and customers when it comes to the notion of delivering outstanding experiences. And we know that there's only 3 ways a company can essentially differentiate itself. It can provide the best product, the lowest price, or provide the best experience. And as we know, companies are shifting towards experience as their differentiator because it's sticky. Price and product are more easily replicated. Because of that, there is a schism between how businesses view themselves and how their customers view themselves. And a Bain study a couple of years ago showed this schism. It's quite wide. If you ask an executive in an organization, do you deliver a superior customer experience? 80% of the time you'll get the answer yes, but if you actually survey the same customer base, it's 8%. So there's a wide gap between perception and actual delivery. Now, there's any number of reasons for this, but I will say this. One of the most common things is that people are comparing the best experience they ever had in any industry at any time to whatever product or service they are using. So companies are up against best-in-class providers of experience regardless of industry. If you had a great experience at an Apple store, buying a Tesla, using an Uber, you're going to compare that to your local bank, your insurance carrier, whomever. And that's just the way consumers are today. So our vision in the matter of this is we want to transform customer experiences. And what is a customer experience? Historically, it's the sum total of all interactions that an individual has with an entity over time. But really, customer experience can be defined simply as what a company does for you, what its products do to you, and then how does that make you feel. And sentiment will become a subject we'll talk about here in a short few moments. But the way we're going to do that here at Cisco is through 3 pillars. AI, meaningful AI, not just speculative AI, practically, or practical AI, experience management, understanding the full spectrum of the sentiment of a consumer across the life cycle of interactions, and then utilizing collaboration software to really bring the contact center into the rest of the enterprise, into the value chain. And so we'll talk about that. You see this term at the bottom, super agent. It's a new term that we coined and several others have coined, what I call make the rest of us like the best of us, and I'll explain what I mean about that in a few minutes. So the current is that the past is prologue. And right now, in the middle of the pandemic, it's very much about empowering remote contact center agents. Well, what's interesting about this, and frankly, a good thing, is that this is not a new concept in contact centers. Virtual contact centers have been around for about 30 years. The first one I was exposed to was in 1992 with a major airline. But the first lights out contact center, where really no one came into the centralized building and everyone worked at home, was actually launched in 1998 by another airline. So this is a mature process. It's just a question of how much density of the resource space is working at home. Most organizations have a portion of this. In fact, many organizations use something called performance-based scheduling, where the better an agent performs, they can choose where they'd like to work. And many times, agents choose to work at home for any number of reasons we're finding out. So how are we empowering remote contact center agents? Well, during the pandemic, we've heard things like, I need to get up and working fast with a remote workforce. It needs to scale. I'll talk about that in a moment. I need self-service. By the way, we are overwhelmed with incoming requests. Obviously, self-service and answering common questions during the pandemic is very powerful, leaving more complex interactions for live assist. And to some organizations coming directly to us that were not formerly customers, I need a new contact center fast. So what we've announced for the marketplace is a quick deployment solution for our Webex contact center. This is a public cloud contact center, SaaS-based contact center. We actually have two offers, but the first here was Webex Contact Center about a month ago, and we offered to the marketplace new cloud deployments in as little as 5 days, and actually we have been able to get some customers up in less than 48 hours. Some of these contact centers have gotten very large very quickly, into the 500 to 1,000 agents, starting from scratch, believe it or not, in under a week. And so taking our existing customer base, and by the way, about 40% of our existing customers have some form of remote agent, and we've deployed a quick solution for remote agents by leveraging existing solutions. We have a number of ways to support remote work with our existing customers. You may not know, but Cisco supports about 20% of the world's contact center agents. About 3.5 million of the 18 million agents in the world are on Cisco technology, and about 40% of our customers actually, as I stated, deploy remote resources. Interestingly enough, one of our large customers just put out a blog here. T-Mobile, famous for their HBR business case review, HBR, Harvard Business Review business case analysis that was done about how they reinvented their service through something called Team of Experts. Well, they actually took that Team of Experts infrastructure, that whole operation, and took 12,000 experts home in less than a month. And you see here, they're still reaching all their business goals, reaching a human first, no long wait times. Every customer can reach them directly by phone or on time, and most importantly, their employees are safe. So a real testament to the power of the Cisco platform, but more importantly, how T-Mobile has adopted in a very short period of time. So the reality is, as we move towards work at home, the question is not only where we're at, but what are we doing when we're working at home? How can we provide this better experience? And so the reality, again, is customer experiences are on the rise. In fact, interestingly enough, customer experience scores across industries have normalized in the last few years. There's not been a lot of progress per se at a normalization level in terms of how you measure customer experience, whether it's NPS scores, customer effort scores, CSAT. And the reason why is not that companies are getting better, it's that organizations like these you see here are setting expectations, and consumers within verticals have higher expectations in a company's ability to meet those expectations. So there's a schism. So companies are getting better, but they're not getting better as fast as the expectations of the consumers. And so, as we mentioned before, experience is the number one way to differentiate an organization. So they're turning to technology for help, and one of the ways they're looking at this is contact center. And contact centers are a front door to many organizations, and historically there has been at times stigmas associated with live customer service, although it's getting better. And what we're seeing is that folks are turning to the cloud for any number of reasons. There's financial reasons, there's agility reasons, there's customer experience reasons to do that, and there's a significant spend increase happening in cloud contact centers, and Cisco is leading the way. Like I mentioned before, we have 3.6 million agents. We've just reached #1 market share in North America a couple of years ago, and we'll continue to deliver that. 36,000 customers, large and small. We have contact centers up to 35,000 agents. We have customers down to less than 35 agents. And a reputation in the marketplace for on-time and on-budget delivery of great solutions, and ratings by companies like Aragon calling us a leader in the marketplace for intelligent contact center. So businesses are turning to our technology for help. And the contact center is so critical now for really 3 reasons. One, it's where exceptions end up. What I call the contact center now is the digital backstop. Essentially, if it can be automated, it is automated, and folks go through self-service. What's left over in the contact center is exactly the opposite of what contact centers used to do. Contact centers used to do one thing over and over, or what I say, one thing a million times. Now they're doing a million things one time. Exceptions, outliers, things that cannot be automated and complex. And it's so important that the contact center now be integrated to the rest of the business so that people can reach experts and information that is not necessarily found in the contact center in real time. So it becomes a key moment of truth. The brand promise can be made or broken in the contact center now because we're at the sword of Damocles, essentially. The fact is that these exceptions are when folks are at the end of their rope at time and they call. And now they need a very complex issue which is lingered, handled. And of course, contact centers are right for customer experience improvement. Over the years, there have been improvements in certain elements of contact center, but if you ask an individual would they prefer call or self-service, sometimes and most often it's about self-service because calling contact centers sometimes can be frustrating. Many organizations are getting much better at this though, and we'll talk about that. So contact center really affects business outcomes. If you look at this layer cake here, as I call it, all the way up from IT to the chief customer officer to the chief experience officer to the CEO, the contact center has a golden thread associated with all these. So performance metrics at the IT level, contact center metrics at the operational level, customer feedback at the business outcome level, and then most importantly, revenue impact at the business level. So contact centers are incredibly important because they touch every element and every persona in the business, and therefore there is a renaissance in spending and interest in contact centers. So our strategy, once again, as I mentioned before, just for repeating purposes, is that we want to transfer customer experiences through the utilization of AI, experience management software, which I'll mention, and collaboration capabilities to directly impact the business outcomes that I mentioned a few moments ago. And so we're going to be delivering this notion of super agents, the idea of a collaborative contact center, one that's infused into the enterprise, and then being able to better measure and understand the experience that consumers have along the journey. So the first thing is this AI augmented super agent. So AI is a hot topic now, and anytime there's a new technology in contact center, the first thing you hear is what's going to replace people. We heard this about CTI in the 90s. We heard this about IVRs. We heard this about everything coming. And the reason why technology goes after the human capital stack in contact centers is that 70% of running a contact center is tied up in people. So people can be expensive depending on the industry. So the idea is technology would like to automate, reduce headcount, et cetera. There's a whole art and science around this. What we're finding though is AI will more likely augment folks, make them smarter, or as I say, make the rest of us like the best of us. Every contact center has a Pareto with some normalized agents, some exceptional on one end of the equation and some laggards in the other. The idea is to move everybody to the right by utilizing AI to help them work better, smarter, providing information, context, insight, help, transcription, any number of technologies that will allow the contact center agent to be surrounded by intelligence in ways that they would never have imagined before, and actually augmenting them rather than replacing them. So we are in the process of partnering up not only with our own technology, but partnering with Google, which is called the Contact Center AI Practice, or CCAI. So one of the things we've done there is embed some of their technology into our technology out of the box in this partnership that allows organizations to directly access natural language speech engines in a very easy to deploy way to create not only bots, but virtual assistants, or what we call conversational IVRs. IVRs have had a history of touch-tone input. People are frustrated. And now, because we're so used to things like Echo Dot and Alexa and Siri, people are more comfortable talking to applications, and that's exactly what this will do. So utilizing our large base of self-service ports to voice enable them and create conversational IVRs. On the Cisco side of the equation, we're deploying some of our own acquired technology through MindMeld and a company called Voicea to do things like automated transcription and follow-up in contact center. A contact center agent has a lot of work to do. They do a lot of keying in, spending 20 to 30% of their time looking for information, and they also have wrap-up to do. Once the call's over, what was stated, what was committed to. Automating these processes are not only good for efficiency, but they're good for effectiveness. And we're deploying that with some of our new technology available as of this February, acquired last fall, and embedded into our portfolio very quickly. So business outcomes are what's AI all about. A couple of studies that we've done. We just completed our own global contact center survey and work closely with the Merdes. And you'll see here that organizations that do deploy AI can decrease call volumes on one end of the equation, but on the other end, the calls that come in are longer and more complex. So there's a tendency, not for a teeter-totter effect with AI, but a level of reducing call volume, and that volume is then therefore extrapolated into the agent side of the equation. Then we bring that down through AI assist through things like expertise finders, which we'll mention a little bit later on. And of course, CSAT when using AI, and the Merdes does a great job in doing studies and analysis in the marketplace. But the point is, we're reaching mainstream with AI, and we're starting to see the benefits therefore. Now let's talk about the collaborative contact center. We know that contact centers historically may have been on an island in the business. That contact center agent as the ambassador of the business, sometimes looking for information 30 to 40% of the time on a contact, trying to solve now increasingly complex issues. And what we believe is that the more we can integrate the contact center into the rest of the business, into the value chain, the better we are at things like first contact resolution. So the collaborative contact center really answers a couple of questions. Number one is, we see that even the best of self-service environments still require support from an expert. So this notion of call containment or contact containment is really a goal, but many times, 4 out of 6 times on average, people still need to come out of self-service for live assist. The other thing we're seeing here, and this is a study we did a couple of years ago with Aberdeen Research, is 98% improvement in customer retention when we unify UC enable, provide unified communications capabilities to the contact center agents. Things like instant messaging, expertise finders, calling solutions, Teams rooms, etc., knowledge bases. When you UC enable a contact center agent, there is a longitudinal benefit to all business outcomes. And so when you deploy these collaborative contact center capabilities, you see just again, the golden thread. Remember the 4-layer cake? Everything is touched in a powerful way. And customer retention is increased, profit margins go up, increase in CSAT. This is a study we did with Aberdeen Research that looked at over 300 companies that had a control group that didn't deploy collaborative technologies and one that did. And the differences were marked between the two. And then finally, let's close on omnichannel experience management. One of the things we know is that there's a myriad of touch points for contact centers up to coming into the contact center along what's referred to as the customer journey. As you can see here, there are physical things like kiosks and other devices, IoT devices, there's social media, and then in the middle here, during the service side, you see the consistent items of web self-service, chat, email, voice calls, etc. What we know is that customer sentiment can be determined well before the individual reaches the contact center. So from that standpoint, we need to bring the information from those experiences into the contact center real time. And so what we've done is we've announced Webex Experience Management. We've written integrations to up to 17 different channels, easy to deploy and easy to ascribe input and feedback from customers along that journey, such that surveys, very simple, elegant, web-based journey sentiment can be acquired and brought to two constituencies: business managers to understand the consequence of the journey, and then contact center agents to understand the sentiment associated with that journey as they're serving customers in an exception environment. So then we can apply a set of predictive AI-driven analytics to say, what if we change elements of this journey? What will this have on our customer outcomes and our business outcomes? Very powerful tool, available since March, Webex Experience Management, a new paradigm in the industry, bringing full journey information and insights into the interaction itself. And when you do all these together, we roll this up, and this is information from Forrester Research that shows just a 1-point improvement in the CX scores associated with the Forrester scale, and that's a scale around ease, effort, and emotion. You see that auto manufacturers would have $1 billion improvement on revenue, retail $500 million, and home and auto insurance and property and casualty $210 million. So it's good business to provide a better customer experience. Now, our contact center portfolio includes both on-premise and cloud solutions. We have a very large group of on-premises customers. We're investing in them, and we're also giving them some very elegant paths, both with commercial terms and technical terms, to move to Cisco's cloud solutions from our Webex contact center portfolio, supporting from very small to the largest of contact centers through both our Webex Contact Center and Webex Contact Center Enterprise, just available starting here on April 27th, 2020. A very large, scalable, it's directly available from Cisco Contact Center solution based upon our very powerful and feature-rich Webex Contact Center Enterprise. And a lot of interest in this in the marketplace for large organizations that want the trust and the feature richness and the Cisco backing for a cloud contact center solution. So in closing, what are your call to actions? Well, look at the bottom. I should have started with the bottom at the top, but prepare for the permanence of remote work. Yes, many of our customers, 40%, already had remote workers, but there was a small percentage that at time in the single digits. Now you see almost many companies, all the workers working at home from contact center. Is this a permanent situation? Could be likely. So prepare for that permanence. And to do that, you need to inspect key moments of truth where the brand promise can be made or broken. Get engaged in establishing a customer sentiment baseline, and by the way, an employee sentiment baseline. Webex Experience Management can be used to assess employee sentiment also too, because we believe there's a direct correlation between happy employees and happy customers. And for the always you out there, check out adjacent industries for best experiences, because your customers are comparing you to other industries. And with that, Scott, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you for your time and attention, everyone, today. Please stay safe, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Zach, thank you so much for sharing that information with us on what you're seeing around the trends and the future of the contact center, but also an understanding of Cisco's strategy as it relates to developing a solution to enable that contact center of the future. Next in our Future of Work Virtual Summit series, we're going to be joined by Barbara Ferguson and Vinod Muthukrishnan, both of Cisco, as they dive deeper into the future of customer experiences. We've heard a lot about that before. We're going to dive more into it in this session. And they're going to offer 5 predictions of where they think this market is going. Barbara, over to you.
The future of customer experience. What's your dream customer experience? If you could envision the future of customer experience, what would that look like? Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ferguson. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager for Cisco's Contact Center portfolio. And I'm here today with Vinod Muthukrishnan. Vinod is the Chief Evangelist and Go-to-Market Executive for Cisco Contact Center's business unit. Vinod is a pioneer in the customer experience industry. He co-founded and was the CEO of CloudCherry, a successful customer experience management company that Cisco acquired. Since then, Cisco has relaunched the CloudCherry solution as Webex Experience Management. Vinod is here to talk to us today about his vision, his predictions of where he sees the future of customer experience heading, and the critical role that the contact center plays in helping companies achieve their customer experience goals. Welcome, Vinod.
Hey, Bob, good to be here. All right, so I'm feeling so good about this that I'm going to add a sixth prediction. The sixth being that the more you show that photo of mine, the less likely people are to log into my webinars. so that's my prediction number 6. But going back to the 5, I think everyone likes a good crystal ball exercise, especially when it comes to CX. We know everyone's talking about CX. And the thing about CX that I find most amusing is anytime we try to look to the future and try to impact CX, we take one of the two extremes. We either use very archaic, very dated methods and somehow expect that to work in the new paradigm, which obviously doesn't. Or the next is we overcompensate towards technology in the future, wherein we come up with bizarre predictions like by end of 2020, AI will replace all of humans everywhere. So the reality, like in most things, lies somewhere in the middle. And as we try to gaze into the future and predict what CX looks like, you'll find that we go back to doing something very, very fundamental. I believe the essence of CX is to use a whole lot of technology, a whole lot of digital, to go back to what we ultimately want, which is to make experiences more human. And to me, that is customer experience, using technology to make your customers' experience more human. And with that, I'm very happy to start talking about where I see the space is going. Awesome. This may seem, the first one may seem like it's not much, but it's actually incredibly significant. Despite all the investments into customer experience, despite every CEO going on record talking about the primacy of customer experience in their strategy, and despite all the money and the effort that every company that I know of, that I've put into customer experience, the gap between customer expectation and customer experience is actually widening. Now, that is not half as dangerous as the fact that the delta between companies that believe they're offering superlative experiences and customers that believe they're getting superlative experiences is actually insane. There's a 10x disparity. So 80% of companies believe they offer a superior experience to their customers, but only 8% of customers believe the same. And as we know in customer experience, if your customer does not believe they're getting a superlative experience, it almost does not matter what we believe we are doing. So the first thing I want to do to set the base is not to say that we need to offer better experiences. That's a continuous and never-ending pursuit. What I want to highlight to everybody listening is the fact that that gap is actually widening, which means every metric that matters to us, NPS, customer loyalty, share of wallet, repeat repurchase, however you quantify financial success, your metrics are actually going to inversely grow. And we need to do something about that now. So that's really the first very bold prediction. It's not that CX needs to be improved. It's not that we need to add more technology. It's the fact that no matter what we're doing, that gap is actually widening. And I want to just move on to the next slide to show what's driving that. Now, I don't know how many of you know this data, but this, funny enough, is for North America alone, if I'm not wrong. We spent $240 billion last year in advertising. And my honest belief is that the entire purpose of marketing and advertising is to just make you aware that my product, my experience exists, right? And to set expectation as to how that product or that experience is going to be. So That is why advertising is never about, hey, these are the 16 things that we deliver, right? It is about the end outcome that we are promising you. Insurance talks about you being happy and healthy. Beverages talk about a feeling, and athletic apparel manufacturers talk about creating history, writing the future, right? And that is truly what advertising does. It sets expectation and tells your customers what your experience is going to be like. But there's a fatal flaw to this. So if you go to the next slide, there's this very interesting thing that I noticed. So usually, if I advertised to you and offered you a white glove, 5-star experience, you came and expected that off of me. And then if I came and told you, look, everything in my store is $3 or less, you came in and expected that, look, this is a bargain hunt, and a white glove experience is not part of the value prop. But here's the thing. You can't hold your customers accountable to what message they saw when they came into your experience, right? So if they went to an Apple store and got that peer expert kind of a service experience, and they walked into your store or your experience or your zone, so to speak, it is perfectly okay for them not to delink that past experience from what they're experiencing now. So you might put your hand up and say, I spent none of those $240 billion. I did not talk about creating legacy or giving you utopian bliss. And yet my customers seem to be expecting that off of me. I actually advertised cheapest product on the market, right? Why is it that my customers are expecting more off of me? So that's the thing. Your customers not just expect from you what you advertise to them. Funny enough, they are now looking at somebody who's offering same-day shipping and asking you why it takes you 7 days to ship that product to me, right? So there's this massive cross-pollination of expectation. And this slide, funny enough, in my own presentation not too long ago was customers expect what we market to them. And now it's evolved to customers expect more than what we market to them. So funny enough, no matter what your brand promise might be, don't be surprised if customers expect more from you. And what we're going to do through the course of this webinar is to uncover how we get to truly understanding what customers want. So if you move on a little forward, the reason why we've spent $240 billion advertising is because that's a means to get your customers to experience. And we do that because we expect certain outcomes from all of that expense we incur. Obviously, a business cares about net promoter score or some equivalent metric. Churn, something everyone wants to avoid. Revenue, share of wallet, repeat repurchase. If you strip away identity from any business, from healthcare to retail to telecom or services, the quantifiable metrics of business success are pretty much what you have on the right? Am I your preferred service provider? Do you perceive me positively in terms of NPS, right? If you do need my product or service, next time will you come back to me or would you go to somebody else, and so on and so forth? What share of wallet in your purchasing scheme do I own? Now, to me, the big thing that matches or rather connects customer expectation with our business outcome is actually the customer journey. When a customer goes through that whole journey, right? So, Bob, you come in, you expect a certain experience from somebody, and then you go through interacting with that brand across multiple channels, multiple contexts, multiple scenarios, and you come back and say, this is awesome. This is a good company. I'm going to come back to them again, right? Or these are a nice pair of shoes. I'm going to buy them again. The fact is that the shoe is not the only element of your product that is impacting your decision to come buy those shoes again, right? It may well be the experience they had when they tried to, exchange those shoes because they got the wrong size or color, or they just changed their mind, right? So the customer journey map, kind of connects customer expectation with customers' outcomes. And when the customer gets the outcomes they seek or desire from you, you get the outcome that you desire from all of that expense that you incur. And all of our business focus on that should be, how do we understand what outcomes customers seek? And how do we understand when they get those outcomes, how does that correlate to or causate the outcomes that we care about on the right? So that's really my first prediction. It's a heavy one, but it does set the base for almost everything else we're going to talk about. All right, time for the next prediction. I wish we had a little drum roll going so we could build expectation a bit, but well,
Brrrrum.
exactly. That works, Bob. So maybe the next time, before we go to the next one, you can do the little drum roll. Okay, awesome. Second one again. So I generally believe that when we get into predictions, we all try to make these really insane sounding predictions because they catch eyeballs. But I generally believe the most life-changing predictions are the most subtle ones, right? So the first one seems subtle. This is even more subtle. Now, here we're saying loyalty isn't the name of the game anymore. What does that mean? The historic perspective to loyalty really was insanely metric driven, which was, a retrospective look at customer experience. So if you came to me, let's say you buy a pair of shoes a quarter. I looked at you and I said, hey, have you come every quarter and bought some pair of shoes from me? And then I looked, kind of trailed that together and said, this is awesome. Barbara is a loyal customer, right? That's a lagging indicator. Transaction is a lagging indicator of customer loyalty, right? A leading indicator of customer loyalty is how they feel about you. How do they feel in the last transaction? Or what is the feeling that's been emerging or brewing over a set of previous transactions? And I'll give you an example of that. I had a million miles with an airline that I loved. Like I was their number one evangelist. I would land from a flight and I'd meet somebody and I'd just tell them about the incredible service experience I had. A lot of your customers are actually born evangelists, whether you know that or not, right? When people get together over a coffee or a drink, what do they talk about? They talk about the experiences they've had, the last holiday they took, right?
Right.
This exceptional service experience that they had. People talk about that more often than we think they do, right? Knowing that that is the case, now I obviously had a million miles with this airline, and my expectation off of them kept increasing with time because I had just kind of dedicated my travel budget to them. And you tend to orient your life around that. So the credit card you have typically is with the airline, right? So everything that you're doing from a consumption perspective, you're aligning towards this one entity that has your undying loyalty, right? In this case, the airline. Now their service standards started to dip. And at some point in time, I put my hand up and I said, you know what? I'm not going to fly with them anymore. I moved, of course. Over the course of the next 2 years, I used up obviously all of those miles in my free flights. They neither had the system to kind of see that happen, right? And call me and say, sorry, what's happening? They obviously didn't care enough to see that a very loyal customer isn't coming back to them anymore. Not that the two are closely interlinked, they actually went out of business last year, right? Now, there may be 100 other factors, but I generally believe a business, it does happen every now and then, but a business that has undying customer loyalty, tons of million milers, would generally stay afloat more often than businesses that don't, right? So to my mind, when we look at any business and we ask them, hey, how do you measure loyalty? And you look at what I call the Stockholm Syndrome loyalty method, which is let's lock them up in points, right? Let's lock them up in incentives, which make it really hard for them to leave. It's a bit like taking someone hostage, hoping that by the fourth day they're in love with you because that's how that's how that's how Stockholm syndrome works. So yeah, I mean, shackling people in loyalty programs or in things that are more restrictive in nature than enabling isn't loyalty anymore. So I generally believe that, and if you see the data on the left, 59% of consumers will abandon a brand they love after several bad experiences, right? Now, the quantification of that is hard. Now, which experience is bad? Which experience are you willing to put up with? And which experience actually causes you to move? You need to know the difference between them. If you go out and say 60% of my customers complained about X, and I'm going to change X without any cognizance of whether that attribute X actually moves NPS or churn or loyalty or not, then you think you're making data-driven decisions, right? But you're not. You're just reacting to wherever the greatest density of complaints lie, and that is not an analytical approach to customer experience, right? So everything we knew about loyalty is changed, and the single biggest pursuit for any brand should be to understand what drives loyalty to my brand or to my experience. A small example, in certain industries, the millennial buyer literally expects you to be known as an ethical business, right? So you may do all the 4 Ps of marketing, do everything right, right? And offer great value for money, incredible pricing, and then somebody, the millennial audience looks at you and says, "Hold on, I heard your business practices in some other country where you do manufacturing is not ethical," right? And they move on, and they move on. So you might get every element of marketing right, and yet lose customers because of an attribute that is not product related, right? That is more brand related. So we need to understand that loyalty is changing. Different customers perceive you differently. Even in the same industry, someone works with you or engages with you as opposed to somebody else for very different reasons. And uncovering the real drivers, the causal drivers of loyalty, is probably the single most important pursuit that any leadership team should be looking at. So that's really my second prediction around loyalty being completely upended, or our idea of loyalty being upended. Happy to go to the next one, with or without the drum roll. Okay, awesome. Awesome. All right, thanks, Bob. Okay, so the third one, funny enough, surprised me a bit. And the reason it surprised me a bit was because um, everyone expected that as customer experience becomes more and more important, uh, you're going to have this superlative title called Chief Customer Experience Officer, which is true, right? Almost every business I know has a customer experience leader. But the faulty assumption was that that customer experience leader is going to own all the customer experience data and analytics and is going to drive changes across every aspect of the business. At the same time, the contact center seemed destined towards that slow car crash wherein it was sort of the basement of the business, right? That's where you stored all the stuff you didn't need. It is where customers went when they had a problem, right? And it was really the part of the business that you needed to have because you didn't have a choice, and hence you could outsource it and all of those things. That, I believe, assumption has completely flipped on its head. Um, Most businesses are finding that contact centers are moving away from being the place where people call to rant. By the use of technology, it's actually becoming an exception center, which means if you are on the phone talking to an agent or chatting with an agent actively, you are talking about something that is time critical and important for you, right? It means something to you. And our ability to remedy the customer's problem then, and the empathy and all the other attributes we demonstrate as we do that, is actually a huge driver of customer experience and loyalty. So suddenly we found that the contact center has a disproportionate impact on NPS or any metric that you care about. It actually covers the entire customer journey. If something goes wrong at the store, chances are you may get a support escalation. If somebody gets the wrong set of shoes shipped to them, very strong chance the contact center gets to hear about it, right? If somebody has an issue with their billing or subscription, chances are the contact center gets to know about it. If somebody tweets about a negative experience, well, that goes to the contact center too, right? You're suddenly seeing there's this entire customer journey that is owned by different line of business owners, all of whom have their own mandate, have their own set of priorities. But it is the contact center where every time some part of the experience fails, it goes to the contact center.
Yes.
So what does that do? Contact center is pretty much the underlying insurance policy any line of business owns. So it's only fair that the new customer experience leader that is emerging from the churn that's been the last few years is actually the customer service leader. Because this team, this person, has been looking at the most disaffected customers for years and years and years, right? And they know what has a needle moving impact on customers and what doesn't. So that is the big surprise for me. Just realizing that contact centers are actually the part of the business that can have a forward looking impact on customer experience. These leaders are now growing up and broadening their horizon to now go back and engage all the line of business leaders. And they are in a position now to truly become chief customer experience officers, wherein they own the data, they understand the customer journey, they engage with the line of business leaders and say, this is the experience the customer seeks. Anytime there is an exception, something goes wrong, or something needs a proactive intervention, right? It is this team that's reaching out. Because one of the things we do is to tell you that, hey, there are customers in this part of the customer journey who are on the web, or who are in the store, or and are going through what we would call subpar experiences, right? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to proactively interject? Are you going to reach out to them and tell them, hey, we know this is happening. Here's what we've got for you. And make them look back at it and say, wow, how did they know, right? How do they know I'm having a bad experience? Or it's awesome that you care. I remember once many years ago when we just started Cloud Cherry, we deployed with a large retailer, a very large retailer, and they had some 500 points of presence. And as the system got implemented, somebody gave some feedback and they got a call back. This may seem like a very simple thing, but a majority of businesses still don't call back disaffected customers. And the feedback they gave us was when they spoke to this person, and they were obviously monitoring all these calls to see how the callbacks are going. The number one thing that the customer said was, I can't believe that a company as large as X cared about that little bit of feedback that I gave. And ultimately, people remember you. I mean, it's a very cliched quote, but people remember you by how you make them feel, right?
Exactly.
And businesses that care, businesses that proactively reach out to customers, acknowledge poor experiences, subpar experiences, right, are more likely to succeed than not. And here I want to add one important nuance. People call the contact center or customer support team because something's broken, right? So if you ordered shoes and they were supposed to be delivered this week and they've not been, you'll call the contact center. If the website is not fast enough or the imagery is poor, you're not going to call the contact center and say, hey, I've got some nice subjective feedback for you, right? It is our job to know that customers are actually not transacting with us at that touch point because of this likely aspect, right? And go back and communicate to them then, hey, we know what's happening. We've revved our website. It's much easier to find our products now, ABC, whatever, right? This is the benefit of proactive outreach. It is not just to reach out to customers who've stated that they have a problem. It is to reach out to cohorts of customers who are having subpar experiences that are quote unquote not call center worthy yet, right? You're not going to pick up the phone and call about. So understanding those nuanced experiences that are driving disaffection, and then call those customers, call, mail. I mean, the channel doesn't matter. When I say call, it could be an email, it could be a chat, it could be anything, right? But to proactively reach out to customers is a critical determinant of customer loyalty. And guess which team has dedicated sets of people to actually engage, reach out to, and talk to your customers? It's the contact center. So no surprise for me here, though I was surprised when I started out that contact center is actually leading the CX charge. And I'm super excited that we now have visibility into that business. But this is the single most defining development in terms of who owns CX in organizations. So that's prediction number 3.
Vinod, I wanted to just make one point. This is actually very in line with a survey that we conducted just this fall. Cisco conducted a survey with over 700 contact center executives, and over half of them are reporting into a CXO in their company. So that's very telling. Yeah.
I mean, exactly right. Because, the proof of the pudding ultimately is how organizations are aligning themselves, right? If you're sitting in a different center, no matter what we say in these slides, it doesn't matter. But when we get data like that, like you just mentioned, it tells you that companies are aligning around this imperative. So I'm super thrilled to hear that that's exactly what's happening.
I should have added that to the slide.
We have something for next time. So awesome. All right. So we obviously thought long and hard about this title. AI is dead. Long live AI. And the idea is for it to be a bit controversial, and I'll tell you why. The biggest disservice to AI has actually come from quote unquote AI practitioners. And what do I mean by that? In the last 5 years, every new technology has an AI suffix. Every website is .ai. It's not .com anymore. Anyone who has any logic or data or analytics to their product claims it is AI. So what you've done is 2 things. One, you've absolutely undermined what AI means. Second, you've overpromised. You've pretty much come out and said that, we've got AI and AI is going to change everything. AI is going to like reimagine the future for you. Every AI image that I see, and I'm really happy we don't have it, has a cyborg-esque sort of an image, right? So you've got this cyborg with, I don't know, a headset or with something, and the whole visualization is uh, that future where Skynet rules the planet, and everything is biomechanical, and that might well be the view of the future. That's not happening in 2020, right? So we should be focused on positioning AI for things that are doable, and not promise things from AI that aren't doable. So a huge disservice to everything, all things AI that's happened over the last 5 years is for AI to promise a zillion things that it doesn't do today, right? But the big trend that I'm seeing, and that's the second part of the sentence, is you're finally seeing AI that actually does something. So if you look at what we announced yesterday with Webex and with Webex with the contact center itself, is the use of real data, real analytics around understanding speech, understanding what the customer is saying, setting up a self-learning loop, right? And truly trying to understand what the customer wants. And as the loop learns and gets better and better and better, which is what AI does, right? You're able to offer much better prescriptive diagnostics on a call, right? Which is the primary medium for customers to talk to us, than previously, wherein you just basically listen to 2% of calls randomly, right? And then pretty much said, hey, okay, this is what we think is happening to customers, right? You're now looking at listening to every single call with technology, of course, understanding underlying theme, sentiment, the drivers, right? And do something with it. So we are seeing real, usable, practical uses of AI, as opposed to the promise of AI, which pretty much promises a lot but doesn't deliver. So um, the big trend, and we're going to talk about that a little later, is just moving away from looking at AI as um, something that will replace everything that we do today, but as a means of augmentation, and really looking at tangible business outcomes that AI can deliver. So from our perspective, one very, very tangible benefit that you can see on the right is improve agent satisfaction and reduce agent turnover. We're going to talk about that a little later, but the point really is you need to deploy AI with two very, very simple questions that must be answered with gunshot accuracy. The first is, what exact business purpose are you here to solve? What is this AI going to do, right? The second is, as a result of doing what you're saying you're doing, what business benefit am I going to deliver? Like, what is the visible, perceptible, CFO identifiable outcome that AI is going to deliver, as opposed to a promise that, oh, we're going to come in through all your data and tell you things you never knew before, right? It sounds really nice, but it does nothing for the business. So really, we're moving to AI as an augmentation tool, and second, to really look at AI to offer very specific, very tangible value. And our fifth prediction is actually drawing from this base. I wanted to call out the death of AI as it has been marketed for the last 5 years to come to this. Um, Everyone, when they've boldly predicted the future, has pretty much said that the human will become irrelevant. Um, I will put my hand up and say very, very boldly, and I'm happy to be proven wrong on this, is that AI is as far away from developing human empathy as I can think. I remember not too long ago, we had an AI demo that everyone saw online, wherein the conversational bot actually used a very human expression and said, like much like you listen to me, and everyone went nuts, right? Everyone said, look at that, that's incredible. She actually knows and talks and knows how humans talk and talks like it. This is in 2019. So in 2019, we're at a point wherein we're talking about a verbal gesture, right, or a turn of phrase being used by an AI bot, which sounds humanesque, is a sort of testament to where AI has reached, which kind of tells you how far AI has left to go, right? Everything to do with human cognition. Um, human empathy, right? Some of the very, very vastly discretionary things that we do, which is what customer experience and customer care are, right? Still need the human in the loop, right? And the most important thing that AI can do, and if we can um, go to the next slide, is to use AI to augment that human in the middle. I'm super excited that we have a real human being in that visual, and the cyborg that is my pet peeve, right? I told you something at the start of the webinar, which is really around the big pursuit of CX is to use a whole lot of technology, a whole lot of digital channels to make the experience more human, right? And there is nothing more human than an empathetic human being on the other side, chatting with you or talking to you, and actually understanding the gravity of the issue you face and offering a human solution to it, right? So, what can AI do? My massive belief, and I'm really glad we're doing things around it, is that AI will ultimately create a super agent. Now, you saw in the previous slide, we spoke about reducing agent attrition. Why? If you give someone a script, if you ask them to look at every customer, go through a little flow chart, and go from option one to option two to option three, listen to half your customers yell at you, spend 80% of your time doing mundane tasks, which is, hey, my account is locked. Oh, let me look at this. Let me click and unlock your account. And then spend 5 minutes after the call writing a summary of what happened on that call, right? And then setting up tasks. You give anybody this job, and you will not be surprised that agent attrition is such a huge issue that faces the contact center business, right? Customer care professionals get burnt simply because they're just expected to front all of this, do a lot of mundane tasks, and yet do superhuman work, right? And all of them without breaking a sweat. So the super agent concept I'm incredibly excited about because it finally brings tangible use cases to AI and augments the human in the loop. So what does it do? So the first thing is intelligent self-service. Now, a lot of conversations, to be honest, if your account is unlocked and I told you, would you like to talk to somebody about unlocking the account? Or I gave you this green button. If you press that green button, your account gets unlocked. What would you pick, Bob?
I would pick the button.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So you have a very point requirement, right? It can be solved in 3 seconds. You don't want to listen to classical music as a wait tone for 3.5 minutes, right? To then speak to somebody who then asks you who you are, validates everything about you, right? Intelligent self-service can do a lot of these things for you, right? You're in the midst of something, you're on a chat mode, all you want to do is to understand that, hey, is my flight delayed? What are my options? Hey, 3 options, take the money back, here's a voucher for you, or this is the next flight, click to book, one click, you're in the next one. Why would you need to talk to an agent for that, right? But if there's nuance to it, wherein you're saying, okay, as a result of me missing this flight or your flight being delayed, right, I now need to change my plans, which means I can't take my flight tomorrow night from the next city, right? So I need to talk to you about changing my entire plan. Go to the human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we need to make a strong distinction. That's first thing AI can do is intelligent self-service, which is not just logic driven, but AI driven, which learns from repetitive interactions and offers better and better remedies to you, right? That's the first use of AI. The second really is, huge part of contact center operations are quality management and quality assurance, right? Usually what people do in contact centers is take a very small sample, right? So for example, if you say, okay, I have a post call NPS which is low, so let me look at all low NPS calls. Now you realize there's 1,000 such calls, so you take a representative sample, you take like 10, 20, 30, 50, right?
Mm-hmm.
Listen to them and say, okay, you know what, this is what we've learned. What if, right? And statistically it's possible those 10 calls were absolute aberrations, right? And the other 9,990 calls told you something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know, right? So the beauty of AI really is the ability to listen to every single call, understand the underlying theme and sentiment. If you see on the right, you've got call sentiment and you've got real-time transcription. So if you look at that, call sentiment is really around what is the agent sentiment during that call, what is the customer sentiment during that interaction, right? What kind of terms or phrases or customer treatments are causing them to get more aggravated, what makes them happier, what's the post call NPS, and what's the sort of causal relationship between the two, right? So truly to understand the subtle nuances in a call, right? And to be able to do that across every single interaction that you've had, and to be able to distill that learning and to push that back into your training loop in terms of improving your scripts, improving agent training, everything, right? Is insanely valuable. And that is a very tangible use of AI that I think we should be super excited about. The other thing really is real-time transcription. Now, transcription may in itself may not seem like path breaking, but anyone who's used tools post a call to transcribe their calls or has seen the transcribed message that sits in your inbox when someone leaves a voicemail will realize that transcription is far, far, far away from perfect, right? I remember if you finished a call and then we looked at the transcription, some of the sentences didn't even make sense to us, right? Because in a multi-speed, I mean, it's happened. I mean, I saw words in there that are not safe for work, right? And, and I know nobody said that during those calls, but you know, there's this base engine that's trying to listen to a multi-speaker environment with somebody out stuck in traffic. You know what I'm saying? Someone's got like background music playing, someone's got a dog barking, and then the transcription that comes out of that is pretty average. I'm very excited to say that we now have a real-time transcription and analysis engine that is absolutely phenomenal in a multi-speaker environment. So AI is now being used with what we do to look at every aspect of that call, go for maximal accuracy, right? Because even a 1% delta in accuracy over a million calls is, my math is really bad, but I think it's 10,000 calls, right? Are you willing to misunderstand what 10,000 of your customers said? I guess not, right? 1% seems okay, 10,000 doesn't seem okay. So really, the scale at which we operate, it's very important to know that any incremental improvement in transcribing the call, analyzing it, understanding themes that are pervasive between calls, and just our ability to go out and say, hey, in this call, somebody spoke about, I don't know, fees, right? And you're like, I don't like your fees. Be able to click and understand what they said about fees, right? Or charges, right? So super important. So if you look at call sentiment and real-time transcription, it does many, many things. It obviously contributes to quality management, but it does something very important to live agent assistance, right? A few things. You've got an agent whose primary job is to be focusing on the customer who's on the other line, right? Now, what is the agent doing in this time? The agent is looking up their database, right? The agent is looking up your history. The agent is looking up um, what offer to give you, right? And the agent is obviously, I just told you, you know what, I know this is really bad. I'm going to ship this to you and waive off the shipping fee, right? Now, the agent is supposed to quickly make a note of that. The number of times we've heard customers say, hey, they promised it and didn't do it. They blame the brand. You know what happened? What happened was the agent just forgot to make a note of the fact that they made that call. And they're human, right?
Yeah,
So
of course.
they need to go to the next call. They've made 3 commitments to you. They're trying to understand the nature of the call. Then they need to go in and tag the call. Was this a complaint? Was it an angry customer? You know, they have a lot of post-call work. And AI is supposed to completely change the paradigm of that. We're doing 2 or 3 very important things. One, on a real-time basis, using the power of AI, prompt answers, right? To come in and say, hey, for this customer, for this thing, this is probably the best, or these are the 2 best solutions. And then you use human intuition to say, you know what, option 1 is good for you. Or even take the choice of saying, hey, look, I can do one of 2 things for you, right? What would you like better? And Barbara is free to pick up what she believes is right for her, right? And that seems like a peer level conversation as opposed to someone just trying to, you know, smooth over what's evidently a bad scenario. The next really is to tell the agent that, hey, basis what we know about the sentiment of this customer, past interaction history, past NPS, this is likely to make the customer happier. So for example, you give me, you treat me like hell and give me a 20% discount, I might be very happy. But same to you, and I might be a bargain hunter. And if I do the same to you, Bob, you might get further aggravated, right? Because you'll say, hold on, so you treat me poorly, and then you think a 20% discount is going to make me feel okay.
Right.
How do you know the difference between Vinod and Barbara in terms of profiling, right? How do you know who would be happier with the discount, who wants you to truly understand and empathize and do something else, right? How do you know the difference between the two on a scale of a million or 10 or 100, right? And that's what live agent assistance does. And the last thing, which is very, very mundane, is to listen to the call, understand what's happening, highlight the key points, take action items, right? And finish all that post-call work for you so that when the agent knows that, right, they're able to truly lean in and focus on the conversation, right? How many times has it happened that we're making paper notes, in a meeting, right? And you start completing your sentence and you've just missed the next sentence that the other person said. Now, in a meeting, it may be okay, but in a two-party conversation wherein I have to listen to you, it is not okay, right? Because you might have just told me something else, and then I don't know if you've had this before, but so many times you have talking to an agent and they're talking to you, and then they start slowing down. And what's happening when they're slowing down is they're reading something elsewhere, right? Because they
Yeah.
see. So they're like, yeah, I know this happened, so let me see what I can do for you. And they're slowing down. It's going from a conversation to a drawl for no fault of the agent, but they're actually going and reading through tons of content, right?
Oh, yeah.
Try and
They're
see.
overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with content. They have way too much on their plate.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So our job is to proactively push next best action, proactively push your customer history, relevant parts of your customer history, not a 10-page summary of everything you've done with us in the last 10 years, right? But the things
Right.
that are relevant, tell you what drives this person's sentiment, drives their transaction, and allow the agent to just overlay human intuition on top and suggest what's best for the customer, right? So
Right.
I know we took a fair bit of time on this, but this is a tangible example of what AI does. It is a very clear example of how AI is not replacing the human, right? And this super agent is something you'll hear us talk about very, very regularly because we insanely believe in this.
Absolutely. And the cost to replace an agent. So the average cost of onboarding a new agent is anywhere between ten and $20,000
Wow.
to onboard them. And it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to onboard a new agent. So it's very costly to the business
Mhm.
when they burn out their agents and their agents leave, and then they have to replace them with new ones. So this
And
is,
you know what's costlier, Bob? Having an unproductive and unmotivated, if that's even a word,
yeah,
agent still on their seat, right?
yeah,
Talking to customers, giving them mediocre experiences, right?
yeah.
Because the agent doesn't know that the customer doesn't know that you changed an agent and all your logistical issues. All they know is that I called your brand, right? And somebody who represented your brand gave you that kind of an experience. So this is like devil and deep sea kind of stuff. So either you're going to lose your agents, right,
Mhm,
which is
mhm.
expensive and time consuming and sets you back, or you're going to have bad agents still in their seats, right? And I'm not sure
Well,
which is worse.
and the good thing about the call sentiment insights is that even the supervisors now have the ability to see how their agents are doing, right? How they're being perceived by customers in surveys, and they're able to then train them and help them, become better at what they do. So that's the other benefit.
I think agent coaching and bargain, from supervisor are hugely valuable, byproducts of this. I completely agree with you. I
Yeah.
think
And the transcripts as well are a powerful tool for supervisors.
I finally read a transcript that actually transcribed what I said. I've read many transcripts with insane words in there, which is, if we were not on air, I'd tell you the words I've read in transcripts that came out of very, very formal meetings, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I finally read a transcript with when I was engaging with Boisia, and I'm like, wow, I have actually never read a transcript that was so gunshot accurate.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, it
Yeah.
is, yeah. So
Wow, this was great. Thank you so much, Vinod. Why don't I summarize what you just said? This was really, really super interesting and a learning experience, certainly for me. So let's just review quickly the 5 predictions of customer experience, of the future of customer experience. The expectation gap is widening. So how your customers are perceiving your brand may not necessarily match what you think it is. So it's very important to be able to have that data to analyze exactly what your customers are experiencing. And it's also very important to make sure that whatever you're marketing to your customers, you're actually going to deliver to them, right? The second prediction is loyalty. So loyalty is not what it used to be. The competition out there is fierce, and customers will leave. They will jump ship. If there's somebody else that can deliver the same product, but a better experience, or even maybe not as good of a product, but they're going to get a better experience, your customers will leave. So people are not as patient as they used to be in sticking around. Contact centers are leading customer experience initiatives. So the role of the contact center has been evolving for the past years, and it continues to evolve. And contact centers really are sort of the front door of your business. It's where your customers, it may be the only interaction your customers have with your company. So the contact center and the agents being, your frontline employees are critical to the success of your business. And then Vinod talked about artificial intelligence and the fact that AI is augmenting your contact center's performance, your business performance, the way that your employees are interacting with your customers. It's making them better and smarter and more informed. It's giving them context. It's not replacing them. And then lastly, the human touch is still very, very, very important. So even though artificial intelligence is bringing in a lot of automation and innovation and helping provide self-service capabilities to your customers, the bottom line is it doesn't replace human empathy and understanding and personalization. So human interactions are still essential in delivering the highest quality customer experiences.
Barbara and Vinod, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us where you see the future of the contact center going and what could be next. We really appreciate your time. And now to close off our conversation around the future of the contact center, I'm excited to bring in Zach Taylor again, and he will lead a conversation with Omar Tawakal, who is the Vice President and General Manager of the Cisco Contact Center. And we'll talk with two renowned contact center analysts, Sheila McGee-Smith, who's the President of McGee-Smith Analytics, and Robin Garris, who's the President of Nemertes Research. They're going to talk about the realities of remote work in the contact center itself. So Zach, I'll let you take it away.
I'm Zach Taylor. I direct strategic communications for Cisco's Contact Center Business Unit. I have some great guests today. I have Sheila McGee-Smith, President of McGee-Smith Analytics, renowned contact center analyst and person behind the contact center track at Enterprise Connect and making that forefront for us. I have Robin Garris, the president and founder of Nemertes Research, does a tremendous job in bringing insights and data to contact center decisions. And of course, our own Omar Tawakal, who is our senior VP and GM of our contact center business. What's really unique about this group of people is they bring interesting and different perspectives to what's going on around us. Now, as we know, we've heard a lot of words in the last few weeks, unprecedented, unique, etc., and those words actually apply to what's going on. But the contact center really is in the midst of this. So what I'd like to do is break our conversation today into 3 vignettes. A little bit about what's currently, and I think most importantly, and Sheila brought this up in our planning session, what's the midterm impact of what's going on? And then stepping back at the end and talking about what is the long-term impact of what's occurring globally now as we all have to adjust to some new realities. So I'm going to start with just asking a question here and just basically say, how is this impacting you, Omar? What is your observations?
Oh, there's no impact whatsoever. No, I'm just kidding. The impact here is tremendous. What I think there's two large drivers. The first one is all of a sudden a huge group of people have to be serving the contact center on calls from their home, and that's a big change for the people who run the contact centers. And then the second major change that COVID brought is just huge amounts of volume. So if you imagine you are, running a contact center business and you have to deal with both of these, it's like all of a sudden two black swans met each other, and it's a lot to deal with. The types of specific use cases those two conditions bring are really four. Number one, you have someone who used to have, a phone that was answered in a city office or in a county office or in a hospital, and all of a sudden they have a huge volume, so they set up an emergency hotline. That's use case number one. The second one is, I have a contact center. I have hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of agents, and I'm going to send them all home, and that changes the design of my contact center and the profile of the contact center, so I have to react to that. Number three is I just have more calls. I'm an airline, I'm a travel company, and all of a sudden everybody's calling, and so I have to handle that. And number four is I just all of a sudden need to set up some sort of bot call deflection, so using AI to try to answer stuff before it hits humans. Those are four of the use cases we've seen spike up instantly that is really keeping people preoccupied.
Interesting, Omar. I like that. And then Sheila, we've heard terms like essential services, and our viewers right now are seeing a slide you shared with us in your neck of the woods. Sort of, we're in the same area of the country in New Hampshire around the notion of what is an essential service. What's interesting about this slide, Sheila?
So, as you said, I live in New Hampshire, and our governor last week put out his emergency order. And when I looked through the wording of that, it was, heartfelt to see the words in there about how the maintenance of communications infrastructure, which we're all involved in, that the work of technicians and operators and call centers are an important part of essential services and have to continue. So as we think about so many people who are losing their jobs and having to go home, very often it's a contact center behind that that's going to help them through that process. And so, it's one thing to think about going home if you're just a white collar worker. It's something else to be going home when you have to be helping to work those people transition out of jobs into healthcare, into hospitals. And so these notions of empathy and empowerment of this contact center, community that we've always served, so much more being brought to the fore over the last couple of weeks and as we stretch into the summer.
Yeah, we're finding out a lot of things that we didn't really, well, we might have known, but we haven't been prepared for, and now we're preparing for them in real time. Robin, you bring a great degree in having an understanding what's going on from a research perspective. What has your research said to your organization that you've captured about what people's preparedness and other factors regarding what's occurring?
Yeah, it's interesting because we finished some research like right at the start of sort of the shelter-in-place orders. So it was like the first week of March, second week of March, and I can imagine that data will probably be very different right now, asking how various virtual workplace technologies are, driving value and driving benefit and what companies are spending on it. It was already looking pretty positive, but I'd have to imagine it's really going quite a bit up since then. In interviews I've done since then, I think it was kind of a mix. Many people, I would say, were pretty prepared for this because they already had agents working from home, so they just said, okay, well, we just need to do more of them. Maybe they didn't realize how quickly they were going to have to do more of them, and how they had to really put all hands on deck to get everybody in place. Even some companies are saying just finding things like furniture, because some of their employees and their agents just didn't have a place to work from home, so they would go out and try and find desks, and they couldn't find desks. Just little things like that. The other thing I would say is that IT people did require some training on how to deal with some of the issues like networking, how do we set up the network at the home office, and how do we maintain security, and how do we follow the regulatory issues, especially in sensitive industries like healthcare and financial services, for example. And then the last thing I think I would say about that would be definitely talk to companies who had some challenges with just the cultural issues and the management issues and the analytics. So if I'm a contact center supervisor and I'm used to being able to walk around a contact center and check things out, I can't do that anymore. So now I have to really figure out how to manage my team virtually while still keeping our customer ratings at a good level, and I may or may not have the tools to do that. So those are some of the things that we saw.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I'd like to ask the group a question here, maybe some specific more than anecdotal examples you've heard of things that are going on with companies or organizations you're involved with. I was out walking the other day. I see a lot more couples walking than ever before together on our block, and lady was walking her dog, and I had worked for home for 11 years, and this is the first time, and she was just talking about what a shock this was to her to be sitting in the corner, and she actually had to go buy a laptop because her organization wasn't prepared for this. So anybody else hearing anything like that? Omar, I know you were recently talking to some customers about this.
You know, I really enjoyed talking to Sprint because they actually were quite prepared for this. They've had to test out programs where they sent the agents to work from home. They've had to deal with situations where there'd be a hurricane, and they've even dealt with situations where they turned their stores into parts of their contact center. So the fact that they had they had tested out systems in advance really put them in a place where they were prepared. We did a video recording of that conversation with Sprint, so I invite you to listen to it. They shared the full set of use cases directly, but it was instructive to see the difference between folks who had seen something like this before, not COVID specifically, but having to shift a lot of people to work from home, versus if it's the first time, and this is really going to impact how we think through business continuity planning.
Interesting. And Sheila, you talked to a lot of companies, a lot of situations. What stood out to you in the last few days that you've heard about?
So almost the counter opposite to what Omar just discussed, right? A smaller healthcare company, 17 offices in pain management. So not a hospital where they would have had that kind of disaster recovery system in place, but think about the patient of a pain management operation, right? They still need what they need, and yet those offices are being closed down, and those doctors are working from home. So we're talking about a population that had premises-based systems, and one option that they had was to just pick up their phones, go home, but then they had the concerns of how do we plug those into the system? How do we have HIPAA compliance? What are the security concerns? Do I need extra equipment in front of that? And this particular 17 office pain management group decided that a wholesale move to the cloud was the right answer, and they were able to do that within a few days. And within a few days, not just being able to sort out the contact center aspects, but suddenly become a telemedicine operation near overnight. Mm-hmm. And without the kind of IT support that somebody like Sprint obviously is going to have, but able to do that because our contact center as a service and UC as a service solutions are just that good these days, and our video collaboration.
That's a great point. We're going to revisit that when we talk about the intermediate term, because people are going to say, well, wait a minute, if we can do it this way, should we ever do it any other way? And I think that's what our planning call we had. You brought up a great point. We're going to revisit that. Robin, you guys do a lot of research and get a lot of analytics. What are the kind of things that you anticipate people are going to need regarding when this eventually gets to some form of stabilization around insights that they're going to need to know?
Well, I think having the insights is in fact what they need. They need the data. I mean, I'm a very data focused person, and I think you can make really sound decisions if you have decent data. So I think the key right now for any company out there is to be gathering data. You have to know, how are your agents performing? How is their productivity? How many interactions are they handling per day? What's their first call resolution? What are their sales numbers if it's a sales contact center? And then you can see, actually, first of all, in the short term, you can look at what's happening with our metrics. We don't want our customer ratings to go down the tank. We don't want revenue to be affected. We want to be helping our customers, all the things you care about. So first you can see from the short term through these analytics, okay, what do we need to do? I talked to one manufacturer who was really working on that, a consumer product manufacturer who's really trying to get these analytics in place for the supervisors so they can make these quick decisions every day, every hour, every week, however they were looking at the different data points, depending on what the data point was. And they were able to try and, keep everyone at least the same level that they were when they were all in the same contact center. So I think it's just having that data for the near term to keep everything running properly and efficiently. Where I think it really becomes interesting is after we're over this, which hopefully is soon. Hopefully we're talking about the future phase of this sooner than we all hope or than we're all thinking. But anyway, I think having this data for the future is really going to help a lot too, because what I found with one of the companies that we're talking to, they're saying, this is crazy. We're seeing better performance now with our agents at home. They're working more. They're not taking as many breaks. Maybe that's because they're bored and they don't have anything else to do, but they're working more. And their sales metrics are better. So why is that? What's happening at home? And is that going to be the case for other companies? Are they going to see that their metrics are better when their agents were home and their supervisors remote? Are they going to be worse? Are they going to be better for some, worse for others, better in some regions, worse in other regions? Then you can take all that data and make a really, really informed decision after all this is behind us as to what you do next. Do you keep people at home, and do you keep them at home all the time or part-time?
If I might, just a quick word. We've had teleworking solutions and agent-at-work solutions, Zach knows this, for 20 years. And yet there have been a lot of concerns about, can we manage our agents remotely? Will they work remotely? And to your point, maybe this trial by fire, literally,
exactly,
is going to make people realize that, yes, this in fact does work.
Yeah, it's interesting. That kind of helps us pivot to kind of our midterm discussion. I think this is really important. Winston Churchill had a saying at the end of the Battle of Britain, this is not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. And I think we're kind of maybe getting to that phase here. And so now we have to say, okay, so that has happened. Now what? What do we do? And I think that there's some interesting thoughts around that. Robin, you had just completed a bunch of research on AI, which is applicable regardless of the situation. And as you see here on the screen, you have some insights that you would share that could be even more relevant in the scenario we find ourselves in. Can you talk to that information that you guys captured?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we see that companies are using AI a lot, and it's growing quite a bit. So if you look at the first chart with 2018 data, we asked organizations to what extent they were using or planning to use AI in their digital customer experience initiatives, and that was 45%. In 1 year, that went up to 61%, so 36% growth in 1 year. So first point is just companies are using AI, or they're planning to use AI in all different levels, small projects, larger projects. So as we talk to companies about AI, we have a roadmap. It's somewhat high level, but we have a roadmap that we look at as a good point, sort of a good starting point to think about these things and look at this then again in the current environment. So identifying business goals and identifying problems and opportunities as the first two things. So what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to improve your ratings? Are you trying to increase revenue? Are you trying to decrease costs? What's your real goal from a business perspective? And then what are some of the problems and opportunities that you're trying to address? So there could be all kinds of opportunities from the business units, but right now I think what is really on people's minds is, well, we've got some problems right now given the pandemic. We have to meet the immediate need, but then we need to meet the need moving forward as to how we get our business back on track once this is all behind us. So what are those problems specifically that you're looking at trying to solve? And then from there, look at the budget. So great, there could be all different ways that we can solve some of these problems. And, for example, being able to address more calls in the amount of time we have, first call resolution numbers going up, being able to make recommendations that have some prediction, predictive analytics around them. So there's a lot you can do. You have to be realistic, though. So what kind of budget can you put forth to an AI, roadmap, and then look at all the different technology. And there's a lot of different ways you can use AI. And then, of course, measuring success. If you don't measure your success, it's going to be very difficult to get more budget in the future if you don't have that success behind you to support you. So as we looked at what problems and opportunities companies were looking at for AI to address, some of it was just very broad, like we're trying to improve customer experience. So if we can do some NLP or speech analytics and make some recommendations based on that, that would be great. Or escalate a call when we see that a customer's typing in all caps with exclamation points, get a supervisor on the line. Then there are other things like just using more self-service capabilities, AI-enabled knowledge bases to guide customers around where they can find an answer quickly without requiring any live agents. Then using those agents more effectively and reducing the long customer hold times too. So if we can just have our agents focusing on problems at hand that require, the human brain, that don't require just, our overnight mailing address is this. But no, it's a more complex issue. Let's put the agents in those calls there. And then that can, of course, help scale the company growth overall if you can augment employees inside or outside the contact center with AI. And then just serving your internal customers as well. That's another way we see companies using AI, just being able to bring HR and IT processes in a more automated fashion.
Yeah, I think,
it's really.
So to summarize what you're saying from an intermediate point of view, right? As we immediately send agents home, we don't have the option to start an AI project, right? But as we think about this being a 3 or 4 month process, there perhaps being a second wave as we look forward to the fall or the early winter, I think there's the opportunity now to Zach's point of being at the end of the beginning, to start to think about how do we plan for the next phase, almost to your point, the next campaign.
Yeah, that is interesting. Omar, you came to us from an AI startup that you built cloud native, and you're helping us get a lot of that infused into our business. I mean, what are some specific ways you would see from your background with this helping in this position we find ourselves in?
Yeah, there's several ways that we can help agents become super agents, but I just want to go back to something Robin said. You basically looked at the 36% increase between 2018 and 2019 in how people would deploy AI. If we could do a survey in January and then basically 60 days later, I think you would find a huge jump there. And one of these basic areas is because of the need to use a voice bot as a form of call deflection. That use case alone is just going to get a lot of runtime with agencies and companies and organizations that were thinking about this, but it wasn't urgent. Now it's top of mind. We have situations where we are deploying things like this in days, and we're doing it in partnership with several organizations. So I think that's going to be one of the big intermediate use cases, which is just put up a voice bot, which is really just a combination of 3 technologies. It's, you have someone come through an IVR and you're doing voice to text, then you're applying intent detection, and then you're going text to speech. And then if that doesn't, there's a couple of turns of conversation. If that doesn't work, it gets bubbled back up to a human. So it's an escalation back to humans. That use case, I think, is going to get a lot of airtime in the immediate to intermediate time. If you look at the next couple of use cases, which I think are squarely in the intermediate and not, in the immediate now for COVID, it's the turning agents to super agents by bubbling up answers to them, because the AI is listening with them, identifying previous cases from the knowledge base or from previous resolutions, and bubbling up answers to them. That's a popular one. And the third area I would say is automated wrap up of the call, so they don't have to take the 5 minutes to wrap it up themselves. But one of the key things I'd say, again, in the intermediate time frame is, although, as someone who's really trying to bring AI to the market, I'd love for our customers to use all of these and more. I would mostly recommend that they try one of them at a time and they get really good at it, and then they jump to the other, because this is the problem you get with AI, that you get the unbounded expectation. You throw all the difficult problems at it and you wonder why it didn't go as you might have expected. So better for you to take a single use case, like you were saying, the simple queries, like, getting the right address, hours of operation, those kinds of things. Get the easy ones out first, get a skill set. That's what's going to get you to be better and ahead of your competitors if you step into this carefully, so that you learn and start adding to it incrementally.
Excellent points. Sheila, I'd love your opinion on this. A lot of times in financial issues or things like this that affect society, people tend to hunker down and things grind to a halt. But at the very same time, what got us here won't get us there, meaning cloud adoption actually may be something we want to accelerate during this time frame, which is counterintuitive to what people do. They tend to just stop making decisions. So what's your opinion on adoption of cloud in regards to what's going on with COVID right now for contact center?
Right, so similar to what Robin talked about with respect to AI adoption, MZA had just published some research about where they saw cloud adoption today, about 17% of agents being supported from a cloud-based application, and where they saw that would be at the end of 2023. And what they saw was that 17 moving to about 35%. But to Omar's point, I think if we were to do that research again this minute, we would see that 35% be much higher. Because to your point, Zach, we're seeing the acceleration of plans. Companies who looked and said, I can stay on this premises equipment for 2 or 3 more years. I can continue to sweat these assets. I can use an offer like Cisco's Flex Plan, right? Start moving toward an operating model instead of a capital expense model, but I'm not going to make that big leap yet, right? And we're definitely seeing the acceleration of those plans. The telemedicine organization I talked about earlier, or the pain management company, I mean, they were perfectly happy with their premises-based equipment and then realized that the agility they needed just wasn't supported by the premises-based equipment. And to your point, as people start looking at the long-term implications, suddenly when you've had this kind of a situation, it's like what Omar said about Sprint, right? Sprint operates in regions where there are hurricanes, so they've always had a plan in place, and they had already moved toward a more agile solution. People are going to understand that agility really does make a difference, and I think we're going to see a much faster adoption. It's, we've been saying for several years, it's not if we're going to go to the cloud, it's when, and now when is sooner.
Yeah, that's a great point. When is sooner? I think that's a quote. And I say the secret of creativity is to hide your sources. So I may be quoting you here in the near future. So, okay, so now we've sort of talked about the short and midterm. Now let's step back and maybe take a couple of steps back and say, from a long-term perspective, what's the impact of this, right? What are the long tail impacts of this? Omar, what do you think is going to happen, 12, 18 months in regards to the subject matter we're talking about?
Well, I would even say just internal to our own business unit at the contact center, serving customers that are on-premise and cloud, we ourselves have seen how fast we can move in terms of, first call with a customer and then 2 days later having them up and running in a significant way. And that has reset the bar. Certainly for me, it's reset the bar of what I expect in the future in just normal doing business. So unfortunate, but that's the new bar, and I love it. So I expect our customers to be thinking that way too. Like Sheila was talking about, agility is not how they're gonna only look at a crisis response. They're gonna want to do business that way, and they're gonna make selections of vendors who understand that and who create the processes that implement that. So, when I was in both previous lives where I was running a SaaS company, we'd have this saying that says, no butts and seats are allowed to get up. You've got to think through a customer coming through and becoming a customer in your organization all the way to them using it and deployed without a single human getting out of their seat. Now, that's harder to do in some businesses, but it's a way of thinking that you're going to see be implemented more and more. The second area that I think is going to change long-term is just, being more sprint-like in the sense of each of us having a business continuity plan that can't foresee everything, but lays out things like, how do I quickly switch my ratio from in-office to remote or mobile agents? And laying out a few items like that. How do I quickly spike up my volume? What are my response? What do I do when I have used a BPO who's in a region that when they go home, they don't have bandwidth at home? These are some of the things that you have to put in your business continuity planning, and we'll definitely be there to help.
Great, thank you. Sheila, what do you think? 12, 18 months from now, what's the long term of this regarding our, the areas that we care about here in terms of customer service, care, contact center agents, et cetera?
So I think, you and I have talked over the last couple of years about the impact of Gen Z coming into the contact center and what they need and what they want. And a lot of those capabilities, the ability to work from home, the ability to be part of a gig operation, gig economy operation as opposed to full-time work, gamification of solutions, something that provides more engagement, more analytics, to Robin's point. I think what we're seeing is that the cloud really supports all of these. And again, where it might have been the long-term plan to start building for that Gen Z agent who's already in your contact center and marching in more and more every day, I think the long-term plan will be to say what worked in the short term, what worked in the intermediate term to handle this, works in the long term for for what we need to be able to do just for our aging population at all.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, very much so. And Robin, close us out here before I make a few closing comments. What about your research regarding the efficacy of home resources and what the long term may mean?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. One of the key attributes, I think, is just to reduce those employee and agent turnover rates overall. Our data is showing that if you can make agents happier, they're going to stay longer. They're going to be happier if they have a more flexible work schedule and work location. So if you can get your turnover rate in the contact center to below 15%, customer ratings actually improve by 26% in our research. So I think that's a nice goal for organizations, is to reduce that turnover rate. The other thing I would point to is real estate costs. So if you look at the average real estate cost, and I know this varies widely depending upon where you are in the country, but if you, the average real estate cost per agent per year is about $8,300. So if you just think about a contact center with just 100 people in it. If you went to hoteling, right, and just kind of said, okay, we're going to let half of our agents work from home, or we're going to let all of our agents work from home half the time, however you wanted to work it out. But let's just say 50% of your agent hours were spent at home. You're saving $415,000 a year just for a 100-person contact center. Imagine if you get that even bigger. Not to mention all the other savings, the environmental savings, and all the other things that you can think of that would go along with that. So I think those are two real important attributes that you might want to look at moving forward.
Excellent. Excellent, thanks. Well, listen, in conclusion, I'd first like to thank our guests, Robin and Sheila, for their, as usual, astute observations and what helping us learn more. I've obviously learned something on this. Omar, thank you as our leader for being there for us and sharing your insights, not only from what you're doing now, but what you brought to us when you joined us just a few months ago. And it seems like a long time, even though it's been a short time, because of your impact on our business. For our listeners today, what we'd like to do is just remember, first of all, stay safe, do the right thing, and take care of, most important thing, your family and your loved ones. Today what we did was we took a look at the immediate impact of what's occurring around us with COVID, right? And so we said, so what, now what? But I think the real value here today is to say, what is next? As we are at the end of the beginning here, what is next for us? Do we redact ourselves back to the way we did? I don't think so. I think we learned today about leaning into and learning from this. There's going to be so many learnings on this on so many ways in society. We're just a small sliver that we're talking about. And then, of course, saying what is the long term of this? One of the things that's really interesting for all of us on this call is to really know that we're part of an essential service. A lot of my friends are in positions where they're sitting around and waiting for what's next. And we have been very, very busy, all of us. So it is good to be wanted in a situation like this, because inherently what we do helps people. That's one of the things that attracted me to being in this industry, is what we do literally helps people, and that's always what is something that's gratifying.
What a great conversation. Thank you, Omar and Sheila, Robin and Zach. We really appreciate your insights as you talked about what you think the future of work holds around the contact center. So thank you for taking the time and stopping by. And that wraps up our day talking about the future of work in the contact center. And I want to thank all of our presenters who came and spoke to us today. Now that leads us to tomorrow. Tomorrow is day 5, our final day of this Future of Work Virtual Summit series. And that day we're going to have a panel discussion talking with industry analysts about the future of work and their views on what that future is. Are we going to return to a normal way of work life? Or is there a new normal that we just don't know about? So please join us tomorrow on our final day of this virtual summit, and we'll see you then.